All right, we'll get started. Thanks everyone for joining RTA's Special Transportation Tuesday webinar. My name is Maulik Vaishnav. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Planning and Capital Programming. And just want to thank you for joining us and thank all of our steering committee partners who work with our team, with Heather, Robert, Michael, and Alex to put this transit-friendly communities guide together. We also want to thank our municipal partners for working with us because the implementation partners are probably the most important part of this. We can't really build a transit-friendly communities without your work on the ground, and RTA is here to support you in many ways. I'll turn it over to Robert Morris here at RTA, who will kick us off, provide an introduction, and get the conversation started. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Maulik, and welcome everyone. We now ask that attendees introduce yourselves through the chat. We really appreciate everyone joining us today. Here's also a snapshot of how today's webinar will flow. We're excited to first introduce to you our panelists before jumping into a presentation on the RTA's recently completed Transit-Friendly Communities Guide. At the conclusion of the presentation, we'll have a panel discussion followed by an open audience Q&A. Please do feel free to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation in the chat function, but we do ask that all verbal questions are saved for the Q&A session there at the end. I'm pleased to introduce our panelists. We have Amanda Orenchuk, who joins us from the Village of Mundelein, where she serves as the Community and Economic Development Director. Amanda is an experienced community development director with a demonstrated history of working with government and administration. In her role at the Village of Mundelein, Amanda is responsible for creating opportunities for job growth by identifying industrial and flex spaces, laying foundations to attract new businesses and development, administering TIF, reporting on the comprehensive plan, amending the village's zoning ordinance, and improving the public space and built environment. We also have Noah Schumerth, who's the Assistant Director of Economic and Community Development with the Village of Homewood. Noah has an extensive background in municipal planning and has participated on numerous award-winning planning project teams, including the RTA-sponsored Village of Homewood Downtown Transit-Oriented Development Master Plan, which recently won the APA Illinois' Vibrant and Healthy Communities Award for 2024. Noah also helped produce plans for the town of Gilbert, the Arizona Mixed-Use Zoning Ordinance, and the Peoria, Arizona Comprehensive Housing Needs Assessment. Noah has a passion for transit-oriented development and sustainable transportation planning and has a background studying sustainable transportation development at Arizona State University and the University of Groningen. The Transit-Friendly Communities Guide is an implementation action item from the RTA strategic plan, Transit is the Answer, which called for a transit-friendly communities policy to set standards for communities that host transit services to support and encourage land use decisions that improve access to transit to ensure that our riders can travel safely and efficiently. The guide accomplishes that by identifying barriers, tools, and strategies for transit-friendly development. The Transit-Friendly Communities Guide is an update to a similar document, Setting the Stage for Transit, created by the RTA in 2012. The new guide reflects changes in mobility and land use development markets, such as a new focus on equitable TOD, new micromobility options like bike and scooter share, and housing availability and affordability challenges. The guide's steering committee included representatives from municipal and county government, CTA, Metra, PACE, nonprofit and advocacy organizations, and developers. The project steering committee provided feedback at every key phase of the project and on project deliverables. Focus groups were conducted with individuals from transportation agencies, developers, municipalities and counties, and nonprofit and community-based organizations. The guide consists of 9 separate chapters and an executive summary. Chapters cover topics such as transit-friendly land use design concepts, a discussion on how land use, market trends, and demographics are impacting communities, and how ETOD can provide solutions, strategies for how to effectively and equitably engage your community members in ETOD and transit-friendly design, a toolkit of land use and transportation strategies and best practices, infrastructure design concepts that prioritize pedestrian and bicycle access to transit, case studies from the Chicago region and nationally that illustrate best practices and lessons learned on transit-friendly policies, and finally, an implementation checklist to help communities start the process of implementing the policies, programs, and strategies discussed throughout the guide. On the next slides, I'll cover some, but not all, of the elements of the guide. The guide itself is comprehensive, and we only have time to provide some highlights today, but we do encourage everyone to download a copy from our website that will be shared in the chat by my colleague, Alex Waltz. One area to highlight in the guide's introduction chapter is ETOD. ETOD stands for Equitable Transit-Oriented Development. While the four core elements of transit-oriented development include density, transit, a mix of land uses, and accessibility, ETOD includes an intentional approach that ensures people of all backgrounds have the opportunity to experience the benefits of mixed-use, pedestrian-oriented development near train stations and bus stops. This can be accomplished by, first, community engagement that amplifies all resident voices in the decision-making process, intentionally working to hear the thoughts and ideas of those historically left out of the planning process. Second, developing a community-based vision and set of recommendations that enables all people to experience the benefits of living and working in more dense, mixed-use, pedestrian-oriented areas that are centered on transit. And third, by elevating and prioritizing investments and policies that close socioeconomic gaps between neighborhoods, improving access to housing, jobs, and wealth building without the threat of displacement. In Chapter 2, the guide shows 3 design concepts to illustrate how transit-friendly elements can be applied to different land uses, geographies, and transit service types to better support ETOD. The design concepts can be used by municipalities to reimagine what their current built environment could look like if they pursue these transit-friendly recommendations. The 3 prototypes represented common scenarios that can be found across our region. First one shown here is a commercial bus corridor. Next, we'll have a suburban downtown with a train station. And third is an urban neighborhood with both a train station and a bus stop. A few things to point out that help contextualize these graphics. On the top left here is the before, so existing conditions. And the larger image here in the center is a depiction of what future improvements could look like. The bottom right corner of the image shows the target dwelling units per acre, as well as commercial and residential parking targets. Key upgrades in the commercial bus corridor include the addition of residential apartments and townhomes that add people and activity generators to the area, the conversion of surface parking to mixed-use buildings with structured parking, the improved high visibility pedestrian crosswalks with a pedestrian island and landscape median to increase safety, and finally, the incorporation of a public plaza and pedestrian paths connecting to bus stops. The second concept depicts a suburban downtown with a train station, bus service, and a historic main street with a mix of retail, restaurants, office, and residential uses. In the interest of time, we'll continue to the final concept, but encourage attendees, especially ones that live or work in this context, to explore the guide for further detail. The final concept depicts an urban neighborhood with a rail station, bus route, and variety of uses and densities, ranging from single-family residential to mid-rise multifamily. Transit-friendly enhancements include new infill residential and commercial development on vacant lots, a bike share station, and enhanced crosswalks to make pedestrian crossings safer. Included in the land use and market trends chapter is a matrix outlining the different recommended residential densities for optimum support of various transit service types for the quarter to half mile area around a transit stop or station. For example, on this slide, a community with PACE fixed route bus service should target 8 to 10 dwelling units per acre along the route. A community with a metro rail station should target a minimum residential density of 10 dwelling units per acre, with a mix of commercial and office units as well. Some areas of the region can support higher densities, such as stations in the city of Chicago or established suburban downtowns. Not shown, but also included in this chapter, are optimum densities and characteristics for bus rapid transit and CTA rail. CTA rail, for example, calls for greater than 14 dwelling units per acre. Our next slide examines how our region stacks up to these optimum density level recommendations. Our analysis found that transit services in our region are largely operating in communities with less than optimal land use densities. Meeting these density targets can increase ridership and address housing shortages and affordability while supporting transportation climate resilience throughout the region. The map on the left depicts CTA rail dwelling units per acre within a quarter mile of the stations. The larger and brighter yellow the circle, the lower the density and greater the opportunity to develop more transit-supportive communities. Average density levels were lower on the south and west sides of Chicago than on the north side, meaning there's greater potential for additional housing near existing rail stations in these areas. This is also a representation of fewer high-density residential development investments in these parts of the city of Chicago. The map on the right depicts the density of the metro station areas throughout the region. None of the station areas with yellow or brown circles are meeting the recommended density targets, which is a minimum of 10 dwelling units per acre. Currently, our region is overwhelmingly below the recommended density requirements to support the transit services that are provided. Based on our analysis, promoting ETOD throughout the region could yield more than 250,000 additional residential units accessible by transit, and that's a conservative estimate. Chapter 5 of the guide provides a roadmap for equitable engagement. We know that equitable approaches to land use planning are particularly critical to historically disadvantaged groups, such as communities of color and indigenous people, people with disabilities, and older adults. Some examples of the best practices included in the guide are development of an engagement plan with a sample plan included that you could model after, meeting people where they already are instead of asking people to come to a community meeting. This can be accomplished by hosting pop-ups at train stations or existing community events. This strategy allows for engaging people who do not have the time or capacity to attend additional public meetings. Also included is guidance for the compensation of stakeholders. The RTA believes in using engagement stipends to compensate individuals directly for their time and to be used for breaking down barriers to participation. For example, providing meals or childcare during meetings. Another tool that's referenced in the guide is the ETOD calculator, developed locally by the Center for Neighborhood Technology and the Metropolitan Planning Council. It is important to remember that equitable engagement is to be customized for your community. There is no one-size-fits-all method to true equitable engagement. What works in one community may not work in the neighboring community. Making communities more transit-friendly begins with decision-making at the local level. Local government leaders can define land use and transportation policies that guide infrastructure improvements and private development over time. Strategies are described in the guide for site design, housing affordability, zoning, active transportation, transit-friendly parking standards, and the redevelopment of underutilized parking lots. Some specific examples include, first, zoning and plan development. The guide includes strategies for mixed-use zoning, calling for municipalities to allow for the vertical and horizontal mix of residential and commercial uses and encourage the adoption of zoning that allows higher density residential development by right, eliminating barriers to development. Second, affordable housing. Affordable housing has become more challenging due to the increase in cost of land, construction, and financing, among other factors. Strategies to help overcome these barriers include inclusionary zoning, zoning and building codes that don't raise the cost of construction and maintenance, and utilizing publicly owned land. Redevelopment of underutilized parking lots is third, including commuter parking. Changes in societal patterns and commuter parking usage provide a unique opportunity to explore new uses for commuter parking lots, including higher density housing. Metra is open to working with municipalities on creative commuter parking redevelopment opportunities. For transit-oriented communities to be successful, municipalities need to plan and build the infrastructure that allows people to access transit, such as sidewalks, crosswalks, bike racks, wayfinding, lighting, shelters, and accessibility elements. Chapter 7 of the guide provides best practices and examples of transit-friendly infrastructure treatments. One focus of the chapter is on bikeways, with examples of buffered and striped bicycle lanes, the use of bicycle signals, and a focus on secure and covered bicycle parking. The guide provides guidance for selecting the most appropriate type of bike facility based on the roadway design, traffic counts, and vehicle speeds. While shared use paths and protected bike lanes are the gold standard for bicycle safety, there are scenarios that make it more challenging to implement these types of treatments on certain roadways, including the impact of bus service. To help tell the story of how many of the strategies and policies in this guide have been used successfully, the guide includes 10 case studies pulled from local and national examples. Of particular interest is a case study on the PACE Initial Pulse Service Line. The Pulse Milwaukee line is the system's first bus rapid transit service that combines transit signal priority, technology, and limited stop service with raised platforms at stations to reduce travel times and provide enhanced rider amenities. Launched in 2019, the Pulse Milwaukee line serves riders along a 7.6-mile stretch between Gulf Mill Mall in Niles and the Jefferson Park Transit Center in Chicago, with connectivity to various PACE and CTA bus lines, the Niles Free Bus, CTA Rail, and Metra Regional Rail. The case study explains how the future redevelopment of the adjacent Gulf Mill Mall will provide 300 apartment units, adding a boost to ridership. Strategies used on the Milwaukee Pulse line, including the strategic location of stations to enhance ETOD, closing accessibility gaps, and taking creative approaches to ETOD, such as redevelopment of underutilized parking lots, can be applied to other bus rapid transit projects in the future. The final chapter of the guide is an implementation checklist that enables a community to fully understand their current policies and chart a path for their land use and transportation priorities. This chapter provides resources to help fund and implement these improvements. One of the resources referenced in the guide is the RTA's Access to Transit program. This program helps fund small-scale transit access infrastructure improvements. We expect to have a call for this project, or for this program rather, later this fall. Also mentioned in the implementation section is the RTA's Community Planning Program. This program provides funding and technical assistance to complete plans and offers support towards plan implementation to encourage municipalities in the region to develop walkable, sustainable, and more equitable communities near transit stations and along transit corridors. The annual Community Planning Program call for projects opens next week on Monday, March 10th. We welcome attendees to learn more about the Community Planning Program and to submit an application through our website linked in the chat. That was a lot of information pretty quickly, but we're really excited now to move on to our panel discussion. Again, we're joined by Amanda Orenchuk, the Community Development Director for the Village of Mundelein, and Noah Schumerth, the Assistant Director of Economic and Community Development with the Village of Homewood. We'll start with a question for Amanda. Amanda, you served on the steering committee for the guide. What experiences from planning for Mundelein to be a transit-friendly community do you feel are reflected in the guide?
So I thought that first of all, the guide was a really nice effort to reach out to communities. There hasn't been a lot in the past opportunity for communities to engage with RTA and the other transportation agencies up until recently. So I think that the guide really takes that, into account and provides good tools for working with transit and trying to understand it, because knowing a lot of other municipalities that are in the same boat as perhaps Mundelein and being a little bit further out from the city, you don't get that chance to engage. So the other thing is that when working on the steering committee, it really felt like there was an opportunity to take feedback on the document very seriously. So it wasn't just one meeting to check the box that the communities and the other municipalities and governmental entities were reached out to. There were 4 steering committee meetings, and the conversation was really robust around everybody's comments.
That's great. Thanks, Amanda. And Noah, you've recently worked on a successful project with the RTA, the Downtown Homewood TOD plan. Can you reflect on your past experience with the RTA project that directly aligns with some of these principles mentioned in the Transit Friendly Communities Guide?
Sure. I am happy to talk a little bit about Homewood's project, which is the main one that I've got background with the RTA. Although I benefit from a lot of different projects that have been implemented around my neighborhood in Hyde Park. But our downtown TUD plan really kind of combined and contextualized a lot of the principles that you'll find in that guide, which is a fantastic resource. It's really started to combine that into the urban fabric of Homewood. I think some of the principles that you've seen that TOD plan become directly in alignment is the practice of the ETOD, the scope of the ETOD, those 4 main principles of ETOD, the density. We've got, we've been promoting a lot more housing density. We're trying to get out of that bottom category on the map you showed earlier from 0 to 5 dwelling units an acre and improving that. It's really been supportive of making that a reality and helping residents understand, what density could look like near our metro station. Obviously, transit, the investments made in our a downtown train station, which has been wonderful for the visibility of transit and people seeing Homewood as a place that can really build around transit accessibility in the region. The key principle in our TOD plan is accessibility. Our downtown is bordered by major roadways. It's a bit isolated from its surroundings, and it's really helping kind of bridge those gaps that integrates our TOD downtown into the rest of our community, gets people closer to using transit, really expands the transit shed, for lack of a better term, in our community where people can easily use our transit station without using a car. And again, improving accessibility of our area. And then the mixed use. It's already had a cascading effect of encouraging new development, new uses, new restaurants in particular, into our downtown with the increase of pedestrian traffic and the kind of vision that we're casting and going forward with an economic development for our downtown. So that paired with the community engagement, and the equity, the socioeconomic equity especially embedded in our plan. We got 2 years with the RTA to do some really fantastic work with our TOD plan, making that ETOD concept a reality here.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for sharing. The next question, this will be for Amanda. Could you share an example of a TOD project that you've worked on and specific challenges you encountered when fostering transit-friendly development and how you overcame those challenges?
Certainly. So, I think our TOD efforts go back to 2004 when we adopted our TOD plan. And when we first started to implement any of our denser developments in downtown, there was certainly pushback on density and on anything that, wasn't termed a townhouse or single family home. Over time, we've certainly focused on education and experience with starting, with putting, kind of smaller projects together, but also like focusing on larger ones. And, it's taken a lot of time to educate the different board members. At first it was, we're okay with having apartments, well, really condos, but not apartments. And then, as time has gone on, we're showing, the transition between, condos, obviously, once 2008 hit, was not something that was going to work in terms of economic viability. And so we were able to convince our village board to work with the developer to change that to apartment buildings. And we actually have a hybrid in our first building where it's like partially owned and partially rentals, but it actually has been a really wonderful project. And the developer has been very open with the board on what type of people are living there, and giving tours all the time of what's happening in the building. And so I think that's important, is to just showcase, like, it's not density isn't a scary thing. So we've had a lot of good experience with adding additional properties since that time, about 840 units since 2015 to the TOD area. And so we've seen that it hasn't been a problem with increasing traffic. We haven't had increase in crime due to those. And it's really been kind of a nice addition to the downtown and the TOD area for both bus service and rail service.
That's great. Thanks. And awesome to hear about some of those success stories there in Mundelein. Noah, question for you. How has your community looked at transit-friendly design and ETOD in the past?
So we have a bit of a unique circumstance where we've had a downtown that's been oriented around a train station since the village's founding. And so we have a little bit of a different approach than maybe some communities have, where you're doing a lot of, say, new parking lot infill, things like that. And it's a brand new community vision. This is kind of returning to a bit more of a form of development that is a little bit more familiar with Homewood's history. But before the TOD plan, we were focused on transit-oriented development already, at least in concept. Our 2005 downtown master plan and our 1999 comprehensive plan both allude to transit-oriented development. But again, I think what you saw in the wake of those plans was a lot of pieces of a transit-oriented vision that I think some community members could articulate, but there wasn't a clear, kind of vision of what TOD can mean. So you had a housing study we did downtown in 2015, 2016 around our train station. We had some acquisitions of public properties downtown anticipating, redevelopment. We kind of got to build up some capital for executing a vision in the future. But again, there wasn't really a glue that held those different pieces of planning together to create true equitable transit-oriented development. And I think that's what our TOD plan was able to accomplish, was able to cast a kind of unified vision, bring these different pieces, these different planning projects together, and actually kind of convert all of that into a clear vision that residents can visualize, can understand, and most importantly, could participate in. And I think that's been really valuable for our community. And so looking at the community guide, I think that it can serve for a lot of communities as kind of the same type of glue that our TOD plan was, where you have these different components, but to really make transit-oriented development work, you need to see a roadmap of how all those can come together and how the community can get involved in realizing those things. And I think that that guide can do the same as the TOD plan did for us, and this guide will continue to help us do moving beyond our downtown as well, to connect Homewood to good transit-oriented development.
Thanks, Noah. One of the things you said really at the beginning of your response to that question, I found interesting and can probably be applied to a lot of different communities across our region that do have a history of rail-oriented development and historic downtowns that, traditionally had a mix of uses, really before auto-centric planning and auto-centric design kind of then took the baton for a while. And just how important it is to kind of refocus on some of those roots of how the town or community was originally planned and laid out, and how a lot of these newer developments may more closely resemble some prior uses in the history of those communities.
Absolutely.
One of the recommendations in really implementing some or any of these recommendations in our transit-friendly communities guide could result in noticeable changes for some communities, which are frequently met with concerns from residents or elected officials. So, Amanda, what can municipalities do to overcome political opposition or perceived barriers to implementing transit-friendly infrastructure? And what has your approach been to this? And have you used effective communication, or how have you really been able to better communicate the benefits of ETOD and gather public support for such changes?
I think part of it is certainly, as I alluded to in the previous answer that I had, was meeting with your elected officials and making sure that you're providing education for them, because they're usually kind of the ones out and about in the community that are answering questions. You know, there's certainly a feel that density is bad, and it doesn't matter how successful you've been with it over time. You know, like I said, we've added, you know, almost 1,000 units in downtown Mundelein, plus another, you know, 1,000 outside of the downtown throughout the entire village. And, you know, people still are kind of terrified of adding to the population, but that we're starting to see from business owners, and they're becoming very vocal about the fact that they're getting increased activity from consumers, and they're getting, you know, more stable clientele within their businesses. And so they're demanding it within the village. I think it's also for the elected officials, strategies I think that might help are going to where those elected officials are. I think that there is a better opportunity at things like IML, where a lot of elected officials tend to gather to have presentations and conversations offline, to kind of talk about the successes that are being seen in places that are welcoming density, improving the, you know, the different infrastructure that goes along with these TOD projects, like wider sidewalks, multi-use paths, bridges, all those things that, you know, don't seem that tangible, but once you add them into the landscape, it can really make your community look a lot more attractive.
Yeah, that's a very insightful response. And I think as we talked in the lead up to this, we discussed sometimes you really just need that proof of concept for either elected officials or residents to really get on board. Noah, same question to you. How does it in Homewood, how have you been able to communicate some of the benefits of ETOD and really start to get some public support for the plan that you did, but also projects that might be coming down the pipeline?
Sure. So I first want to second that, or something that Amanda said, which was getting public officials involved. I think that's really, really critical. We were really cautious to ensure that we were getting our board involved with the TOD plan, both during the process, but then also after, and really continuing to vouch for the benefits of transit-oriented development when we say reach a contentious project, particular development, changes to our parking strategy downtown, things like that, to really communicate why we're doing this. And again, really build out that vision. And again, using tools such as RTA tools, our TOD plan, things like that, again, to really help communicate that vision well. I think that that's kind of a good plan in action. And I think that, you know, just getting those public officials involved is really critical. I think that something that I would say for overcoming political opposition or you know, barriers to implementation, I think that doesn't just come when you're actually creating a TOD plan, but comes with the part of implementing the plan after that. I'll use an example from Homewood. We've been moving a lot of our parking areas around to accommodate, you know, to prioritize some commuter traffic, but then also to, you know, free up some sites very close to our transit station for housing, for new uses for the downtown, you know, economic development work. Which has come with a lot of questions and a lot of concerns from community members. And so what we've actually been doing for the last 2-3 months is we've gone to our community festivals. We created a focus group. We created some surveys. We did we've done different activities to try to reach out to people to understand, okay, with parking, how do you park? What are the actual challenges you have? Where are those challenges? And again, how can we be responsive to that while also unlocking the benefits of housing density in the downtown, having these key development sites for things that are really going to benefit the downtown for a long time. And then again, kind of plan our parking strategy and accommodating, some parking needs and implementing the TOD strategies for parking, kind of around integrating that feedback into that. And so we also took that to the village board. We presented our findings from the public and, what we had recommended through the TOD plan. We've also been redesigning our website and parking resources to make more information on parking readily available, while also as we make changes, while also communicating why these changes are happening and how we're listening to residents. I think all of this is just kind of part of the community support process that doesn't stop once that plan is created. That's an all staff effort that involves your village manager's office, your planning staff, your communications managers, and who's working on even just things like social media, things like that. It's an all team effort. But also, again, when you do really effective TOD planning, when you cast these visions, you can also not only just get more residents and more people involved in your community, but more of your staff in an organization involved. And that's what we've done here. So that's one thing I think you can do is really just continue these concerted efforts to engage the public. Again, do the types of equitable engagement that are focused on in the communities guide, going beyond the plan into the future with whatever you're looking to do to support transit.
That's great, Noah, and totally agree that it's an ongoing process. And if implementation of a plan is going to be successful, those communication and engagement efforts need to continue throughout the implementation of the plan. And also a great segue for a question about that inclusive and accessible engagement. So want to ask you both, starting with Amanda, what steps do you take to ensure that planning in your community is truly inclusive and accessible? And could you share any creative approaches that you've used in the past to engage members of the community who do not typically participate in the public process?
Certainly. So it's really hard. I mean, as we all know, it's really hard to get public engagement. There's certainly meetings that we've had around here where I'll even tell staff, I'm like, if we're lucky, if we'll get 30 people to attend this, and if we get 30 people, like that's success in terms of getting people to comment on what we're doing. But we've done a couple different things to engage with the public. We do have a large English as a second language population, including like Eastern European. We have a lot of Spanish speakers and other languages. And so what we've done is we've made sure, like when doing community surveys, that we make sure that the software that we're using translates successfully into multiple languages. So there was a recent survey we put out that we really investigated all the different platforms to just make sure that we were doing one that we could hopefully get some better feedback from those people that weren't primarily English speakers. We also have a Latino Citizens Police Academy that was started about 18 years ago. And that is something where we feel we've had a lot of success with communicating with people outside of the village government. So they now trust our police department and are able to ask questions and communicate things that are happening within the community through that. And then, like you say, going to places where people are, going over to our park district and our schools, and making sure that we're at the farmers market. And I think Noah said that very similar things that they've been doing in Homewood. And so it's just trying a variety of things is really key. Doing things in are very visual, because everybody's visual, so trying to make sure that you're eye-catching things so that it's not something that people just pass by. So but still very challenging, and every once in a while, if you hit that nerve of people, that you'll get the big crowd. But certainly trying in every way that we can to get out there and get the word out what we're trying to do here.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, it certainly is, one of the more challenging aspects of a planning effort, or really ongoing planning and implementation is knowing how to communicate with people, and we're always trying to come up with creative approaches. Noah, any particular creative approaches that work there in Homewood when trying to talk to people and engage people for the ETOD plan or the TOD plan or any other planning efforts?
Absolutely. I think we had a mantra that was shared by, I believe, one of our consultants during the process. It was, and she said, meet people everywhere you possibly can. If you're really going to plan not just for commuters, just the transit users themselves, or planning for whichever other group that, you're trying to plan for, but actually creating truly inclusive transit-oriented development for everybody, you have to meet people everywhere they can. And so we took a variety of different approaches, just because, especially because our kind of tried and true public input methods often draw just one particular type of person, right? They're often the ones who are very involved in local government, are very vocal, and again, they have wonderful things to share and great ideas, but you want to draw in as many voices as possible. And so we did a variety of different methods. Most notably, we had a steering committee that was all residents. They were self-nominated. We were trying to push that out in many forums as possible to try to draw people out to be a part of that committee. We were part of almost every single public festival through the planning process, just constantly keeping that available for input, for people to ask questions, which is a major part of input, just to teach about some of the basics of what transit-oriented development is aimed to do and how it can benefit residents of our communities. We did a bicyclist outreach even. We were at a bicycle event to understand how bicyclists in our community want to or where they feel unsafe and where we can improve planning efforts. We reached out to our business association and we're constantly involved in their meetings. We were really going out to meet other people in the forums of their day-to-day life. I mean, I'm trying to think of all the ways we did that. We even once were at the train station with breakfast, and just it was an opportunity to just again meet people in their daily commute when we wanted to understand the commuter experience and how to improve that, to gain feedback. And the TOD plan really was designed to be an inclusive project that meets people where they're at. It is, and again, just create an environment where people can say what they wish to say about it, good, bad, otherwise, no matter what. I'm trying to think of, we had comment boxes near where we do water billing on our first floor of our village hall. And I'm not going to say every comment in that was kind, but it was important feedback, and it was important to, again, just get comments as people are, as they're feeling. It's really authentic and it was really valuable for the planning experience. So it really made it possible for Homewood to become a truly equitable community hub going forward, where people feel like they have stake, they have a sense of ownership to our downtown, which is what you really want to do with a downtown TOD project like this. And then, as I mentioned with the parking engagement, and we've done it with other topics, when implementing the plan, the approach stays the same. Meet people everywhere you possibly can. Just get involved in the life of your community when doing this kind of engagement, and you'll produce really meaningful change to your plan in a way that reflects the wants of your residents.
Thank you both so much. Want to get to our open Q&A. We've got about 15 minutes. I have some questions here to get back to if we still have some time, but definitely want to open it up to the audience for questions. I'll first go to Alex. If you could present, maybe start with a few questions from the chat, if we have any.
I answered most of the questions that came in the chat. I think one thing that, I guess I would be curious if you had a reaction to, did the guide identify what park and ride usage rates would be required to offset a station that has lower than the recommended densities we're presenting in the guide?
Could you start the first part of the question again?
Yeah, so this person is wondering, say, for example, you are in a community that has a lower level of density than is recommended in the guide. did we provide what level of park and ride usage rate you would need to offset that lower density in terms of
I
ridership?
don't know that we provided that specific metric, but that's certainly something we could look into. And then I guess I'll just open it up now. If anyone wants to come off mute, feel free to just come off mute. If you have a question that's more for the RTA, that's great. If you have it for panelists, that's great too. Chris, I see a hand.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. I apologize. I had to hop off and then hop back on here.
No worries.
So I will just ask my question out loud. I appreciate the segment earlier in the presentation about being able to reach community members who maybe aren't able to go to all of the committee meetings that currently occur. Who would we need to get in touch with so that we can have a community input session here at our offices at Access Living to make sure that people with disabilities are being prioritized on upcoming transit planning?
Yeah, Chris, first, you can reach out to me directly and I can help work on the RTA side to make sure that you're connected to everyone that's really the best possible. I have my contact information that'll be on the next slide here.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure thing. Any other questions from the audience?
Yes, John Paul Jones from Grover and Englewood.
Hey, John.
Speaking to the, I know Metric for years had a TOD strategy that I know I've always looked at as a good reference. I'm curious if the speakers, did they use that as well, or is just this RTA study approach to TOD? Because I know Metric has a long history as well.
I can take the first stab at just at speaking to Metro's cooperation and participation in the Transit Friendly Communities Guide. It's been an ongoing effort to work with Metro and any TOD or ETOD planning effort, really almost any planning effort that comes out of the RTA and especially the community planning program is an effort that involves Metro. And so they are able to typically sit on a steering committee of all of our projects and at minimum provide feedback for all project deliverables. We've also been in touch with them on some of their new parking standard publications. And so it's really an ongoing dialogue, but I'll pass it over Amanda or Noah if you guys have ever used the Metro TOD standards.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. First of all, and I'm cheating a little bit because Alex was involved in our planning efforts here in Homewood as part of the team that we worked with. But when we did the transit-oriented development master plan through the community planning program here, the transit service boards were involved with our our ongoing efforts with reviewing the plan. They're involved in the work that RTA was contributing to the project. Again, they were a part of that process. So I know that I'm fairly new to the Metra TOD strategy itself. I can say that a lot of what is in the plan is deeply in alignment with what Metra hoped to do in the future with transit-oriented development and with other service goals that are included in their plans. But I know that a lot of that involvement came through the work that we did with RTA. Really just bringing different partners to the table to look at our plan to help us with recommendations. Again, I'd say there's a lot of synergy there. And I do have a copy of that plan as well with me in my office. So it's something we do refer to as well. So yeah, it's part of a broader ecosystem of planning that we're doing here, at least in Homewood.
I do have some comments on, working with the other transit agencies, both Metra and PACE. And I know I said at the beginning, like, the transit agencies seemed like they were kind of a foreign entity. And, that was, in the past. And I would say that, in recent years, it's really been apparent, like the amount of public outreach and involvement of all of the agencies. And I see a couple, I see David Kralik on this, and I also see Ed Gallagher, a couple different people I know from PACE and Metra. And you know, I would encourage anybody that's listening, obviously, if you're listening to this, you're interested in what's happening with RTA and how to make communities better for transportation, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum, and you really have to push your community out there to understand what it takes to, you know, create an environment where transit can actually thrive. And we talk a lot about transit, but also, you know, multimodal opportunities with bike paths and sidewalks and pedestrians and things of that nature. It's not easy, and you know, you learn a lot with communicating with the different agencies about what they need in order to serve the public. And not everyone's going to get a rail station. I know there's a lot of people that say, just throw it out there, we're going to get a rail, you know, we want a rail station. Like, that is such a high cost thing to get. And, you know, it's not just something that they can flip a switch and now all of a sudden you've got rail service. So starting with PACE and, you know, things like VanGo and Vanpool are great opportunities, and on-demand services are probably a better starting point, and understanding what it takes to get that. But you know, there's not enough, I don't think there's enough communities that get involved in the conversations. I think we all just sit in the background and kind of let the transit happen to us instead of trying to make opportunities for transportation. So.
And if I can just quick build off of something Amanda said that I think was fantastic, is in working with, you mentioned some of the PACE options and you know, more communities getting involved. I think some communities can feel a bit of a, how do I get involved, kind of head scratcher kind of question. You know, oh, we want to improve transit. We don't really, we don't know how to engage the transit, but we don't know what we would, almost like, what would we say? How do we want to prescribe different things for our communities? And that's something I think the new the communities guide does really, really well. I'm thinking about some of just the PACE programs and kind of the suite of options that are available there. Those can give a language to communities to identify, oh, my community has this particular transit challenge or has this density level, that these are the conditions we have. Here's some options that exist that we can actually now go to PACE or to RTA or these other transit agencies as we get more familiar with them in the planning process, to say, we'd really like to explore this for our community. Where can we start? What programs can we apply for? Things like that. I think it just guides like this can really build better discussions with the transit agencies in a way that's pretty daunting if you don't have it. So I wanted to contribute that as well.
Thank you both. Any other questions from the audience?
Robert, I think some might have been submitted through the Q&A function. Were there any that you saw there?
Okay, let's look. Got it. Okay, yes, I see some. First one from Brian Larson. Thanks for joining us. Does the analysis identify what park? Oh, that one was already answered. Sorry. For Amanda, Noah, have you ever explored with a developer, particularly multifamily residential or anything else, where they are seeking relief from parking requirements, providing a direct transit inducement for the future users of the development, for example, reimbursing a portion of future tenants' monthly venture expenses? If so, what was the reaction?
So I'll take on, in terms of parking. So the Village of Mundelein already has a reduced parking ratio from what you've seen in traditional, like 1980s, 1990s, even parking ratios. We're still, you know, I would say our transit service isn't frequent enough to have people go probably without having vehicles, but we do have one parking stall per unit requirement for the downtown. We have had where we will count things like on-street parking towards those parking requirements. We don't reimburse, you know, for that. And like I said, we don't get that much service, particularly in you know, the middle of the day. So it's really difficult to kind of say people can go without a car. We would love to get there, and obviously having lots of conversations regarding that. But I think at this moment, just trying to get people into this area and building the density in the units is really the primary focus. And so we're willing to give variances and some relief on those requirements.
Yeah, I'll second a little bit of what Amanda's saying too. There's we have a challenge where the Metro Electric runs, I would say frequent enough to be very useful for a lot of things, but again, that frequency to the level where you can start to regularly vary parking requirements or have a cash in lieu of or say some sort of in lieu program for parking, I think it would still be a little bit of a challenge. I think we find that a lot of people who are starting to move to our new residential projects downtown tend to own a car. We definitely see lower car ownership rates, just getting to know people starting to move to our downtown and getting involved in public processes. But the demand is still there just by nature of still having a long way to go in terms of car dependence in this part of the region. And so we've definitely explored some creative options. We have, for example, our Hartford building, are the first mixed-use building built downtown, has parking off-site that is using a part of an existing hotel parking lot that was underutilized as a way to, again, kind of offset some of the parking demand on the very small site that's built on to make that project possible. And we may explore that for future options or just getting strategic about where parking is located and utilizing existing parking that's not being used, whether it's through lease agreements or other tools built in the development process. It's something we may look at in the future, but right now it's really about kind of getting creative with especially the 1 per unit kind of parking ratio. It's still a big step for our community in the right direction. But we're excited to explore more in the future.
Yeah, I have a follow-up on that too, is making sure that I think the village is more able and willing to support businesses that are necessary to service all of these residential units. So making sure that there's a pharmacy nearby, a small grocer or something where people can walk to that, having these types of amenities has been really helpful. We've been lucky that we do have a grocer within walking distance of a lot of this density. We have the post office and the Walgreens. And so there are things for people to actually go and do and get to very quickly. And that's probably easier for the village to bite off in terms of trying to find support to keep those here versus like trying to tackle that parking issue. So.
Great. Now we have maybe time for one last question. If there's anyone else that has a question from the audience, David Kralik, go for it.
Sorry, that was an error on my part.
Oh, okay. Anyone else? Got about 30 seconds left here with everyone. If not, we really, again, thank you so much. Thank you really first to our panelists for providing so much insight and thoughtful responses to our questions. And again, thank you to all of our attendees who took time out of your lunch hour to learn about our transit-friendly communities guide and some ETOD best practices here in the region. And we do encourage everyone to check out our website where you can download the guide. You can find out more about the planning process, and also to tune in and our community planning call for projects does open next week on Monday. So we do encourage everyone to check out our website for that. We will have an application that goes live on the website next week, and we're really excited to work with more communities throughout our region to implement ETOD and to bring some of these best practices that are included in the guide to life. So thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your day.